headset microphone.
My my old, what do you mean?
Like the old setup with the headphones and mic attached.
Okay, that one, yeah.
The ones you used in your previous interviews.
Yeah, yeah. No, like I said, my friend gave me this microphone, so I have to test it. And now I need other headphones as well. Oh, maybe I should change um, maybe should have a decent shirt on. I don't know.
No, you look good.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh Welcome to Sage Rage, man.
welcome.
Yeah, very nice to have you.
Thanks for having me here.
Yeah.
It's both a pleasure and a privilege.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is, I think this will be the first recording in over a year or so, almost a year. Maybe not really a year, but yeah, the first recording in a very long time at least. I don't have
It's
the
my
exact, yeah.
first interview, like in a channel that I followed as well. So um,
No.
it's
No.
it's my first interview in all regards, but like let's put it the previous way because it sounds way better, more fancy.
Yes. Yeah, man. It's nice. It's nice. It's very nice to have you here. Okay, so we have Cagdas Özenis here. It's actually a good friend of mine since the master's days at Lund University.
And the masters that
In,
I've never finished, but learned a lot from
yeah,
regarding globalization theory.
yeah. But you must have finished them, right? Otherwise, you cannot have finished your PhD.
I know, but like I finished another master's program in Turkey.
Ah, yeah, 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 yeah. That's how it was. Okay, yeah.
My
So you can
my
tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, where did it all start, so to speak, or how did you reach your PhD? Because yes, you were at Lund University, but you didn't finish the masters. You finished the masters at a
Middle East
university,
Technical University,
yeah, in
and
Ankara.
I had a PhD. Yeah,
Yeah.
the thing is, I knew that you were gonna ask this question
Hmm.
since I watched your previous interviews, and I come up, came up with a fancy answer. But to be honest,
Hmm.
it's a pure luck that I like. At least like I always knew I wanted to be a scholar,
Hmm.
even back in high school. But like an IR scholar, that wasn't what I in my mind because like back then, I remember the school counselor asked me like before the university entrance exam what I wanted to be, and I told her that I wanted to be a scientist, like a scholar. But like back then, being a scientist meant like studying positive sciences. So like she asked me like, what do you mean by scientist? Like you could be a scientist in almost like any area or discipline, like including like jewelry design.
Hmm.
It all depends on how much you want to study the subject
Yeah.
at hand. And I thought I mean like being a chemist or a biologist. And then she said, "Oh, you mean natural sciences
Hmm.
or positive sciences?"
Hmm.
I never thought like I will end up in the negative sciences end of the spectrum. But like, so like my first choices were actually genetical engineering or so.
Yeah.
But like by pure luck, my parents actually encouraged me. Let's not say forced, but encouraged me to write this program for
Hmm.
my choices, and then I get admitted. And
Hmm.
after a year of study, I was still thinking about like contemplating about like quitting college and re-enter the exam and study positive sciences maybe. But then I saw that I'm really successful
Hmm.
in political, even though
Hmm.
like I think it's a curse studying political science or international relations.
Yeah.
I was still quite successful at it. So like I continued my studies, and like there was the fact that like my college program was a dual diploma program organized by like State University of Binghamton and Kent University. So there was this other upside that's studying 2 years in United States.
Hmm.
So I said, why not? And like I continued, and like I was a very successful student. And from then on, like
Hmm.
I knew that I wanted to because like I love the idea of being a college student, let's say, not
Hmm.
maybe
Yeah.
like a high school or
Yeah.
but like the university environment
Yeah.
was just like really very inspiring and
Yeah.
make, makes
And
you feel,
free.
yeah, it is
Yeah.
free.
Yeah.
Like compared to a business environment or
Yeah.
like working in
Yeah.
a government or a public institution or in an international organization.
Mm.
Like compared to all those other options of an IR graduate, like
Yeah.
staying at school
Yeah.
sounds best. So, and like, the idea of getting paid
Yeah.
for reading and writing,
Yeah. Exactly.
is,
Exactly.
I think it's a privilege that
Yeah.
many don't have. So,
Yeah. 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 It's
but
a tremendous privilege. I mean, those years are very rare because you get the chance to just spend time reading exactly what you want
yeah,
and just exploring exactly what you want and just read and explore ideas and ideas. And it's like an amazing time. And then afterwards, you get a job, you get children, you get a wife, you need to take care of a family. You know,
exactly.
you
Then the
don't have
life hits. Then the life, the
you
real
don't
life
have the
hits.
same freedom to just read and explore and it's an
Yeah,
amazing time.
and I think
And
like.
then, if of course, if you get to work within academia, then you can continue to work with that, and you get paid for it. It's a tremendous privilege.
Yeah, it is. And especially like during the early college or university years, you have this, like at least I had this vision that I'm really on top of my subject. I know a lot about
Mm.
IR.
Yeah,
But as the years passed by and like I
yeah.
started studying
You
more
don't
and
know
more, now
anything.
I realize how ignorant
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was back
yeah,
then and how ignorant I am still. Uh,
yeah,
so on the
yeah.
way, actually,
You get that.
you
You get a real shock when you do your PhD. Actually.
yeah, it is. Yeah,
Mm,
you're right.
mm,
But like the thing is, after I graduated
mm,
from university, I didn't want to study international relations. That's
mm.
where we met, like
Yeah,
the global studies program,
yeah,
the interdisciplinary social sciences
yeah,
program
yeah,
at Lund University,
yeah.
because I wanted to study social theory because all of those critical theories that I heard
Mm,
in IR, like
mhm,
regarding having like a realism being the the hegemonic paradigm, and
mhm,
like that it overlooks all the social and economic aspects of social life. And then I said like I'm gonna study social theory no matter
mm,
what, like social anthropology,
mhm,
sociology, or like interdisciplinary social sciences program
mm.
as of ours,
Global studies at Lund
global
University.
studies or development studies,
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
Uh, and then I tried it. I failed, as you know, like unlike you. But then there was this government, uh, let's say, scholarship, or like it was like a fun, not exactly a scholarship. I still had to work for it, but
Mm,
like it was a program by the Higher Education Council of Turkey.
mhm,
And then they say like you can participate in the program, but then you have to study international relations for your master's as well. I
mm,
tried to stretch out like my options
mm,
by using the information that I gathered in my Swedish master's program. I told them now yours is a very positivistic way of
mm,
approaching
mm,
social
mm.
sciences. Like interdisciplinary approaches are getting more and more prevalent, but they didn't buy it. So
Yeah,
they say we want specialization, and
yeah,
specialization requires you to study, like the same topic that you studied at college.
yeah.
So then because then I had to start working at some point because so then I said, okay,
Mm,
so that's the case, that's the case. And I studied. And then actually, regardless, it didn't kept me from studying social theory, but through an IR lens.
mm.
And then that's when I realized actually traditional social theory itself lacks the international dimension altogether. Like,
Yeah,
the theory that I mythologized so much, like compared, because, since Martin White, there's this saying like why the poverty of IR theory,
yeah, yeah.
and I always want, because
Oh,
I'm
IR
not
theory
good
is
at it.
dead.
Yeah, that is it. Always like in every decade or so, the same discussion
Same
comes.
discussion comes back, and then it's
Yeah,
another
it comes back, and
hyperbole,
like people
and
say IR theory, it's not a real theory. And what is there to theorize anyways? It's
mm,
like because of the anarchic environment that the rules are pretty much set. So I thought like when I studied political theory or social theory, there would be many more other options. But then there I realized the social theory is very
yeah,
internalistic. It's
yeah,
like there's this ontological singularity
mm,
actually surrounding social theory. So I said there could be a good place to start. Why social theory lacks the international dimension.
mm,
All the theories whether in sociology or economics or so, they were all based as if there was only one society. And so came the Eurocentrism critiques and others, because it was based on a single society, as if that was a universal form or a socio-political entity.
Hmm.
And then that's how I actually, that's why I studied like for my master's thesis.
Hmm.
I studied on theories of nationalism, because
Hmm.
and like the international space within theories of nationalism,
Hmm.
because the name of the discipline itself, the very name international,
Yeah, yeah.
actually like
International. Yeah.
requires you to have a theory of nationalism,
Mm, mm,
but like because it's not interstate
mm,
relations.
mm.
When we talk about organizations, we don't say they are interstate
Well, well,
organizations.
well, 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 some say that.
Some says
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Intergovernmentalists, the
I
intergovernment,
think Busan says interstate system
yeah,
actually. Yeah,
it is.
yeah, yeah,
And actually, like what we studied was
yeah.
like interstate.
Mm.
At least what I studied. I don't know how was your college education,
We
but
can
like what they taught us
interpolity
was like,
relations.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was relations between polities.
Polities. Yeah.
But like we mostly equate those polities with nations.
Mm. Yeah. Nowadays. Yeah, yeah,
But even though
yeah. Mm.
they don't necessarily, most of the time they don't actually correspond to the same thing.
Mm.
But there's this idea that, and that's when I studied the theories of nationalism,
Mm-hmm.
I saw that like it's not only IR that actually overlooks
Mm-hmm.
the social or economic aspects of social phenomena, but social theory itself overlooks the international dimension, because, or
But
they
but
embrace.
but but what about the world society concepts? What about the world system? What about those concepts that we have in IR that, I mean, in some
It
sense,
is like
point to a world society? I
it's
mean,
most of the time, it's the phrase, the domestic analogy is like a very fundamental concept in international relations, because
hmm
most of the time when like the world society itself still was once again modeled after a singular, a historical, universalist understanding of a society. So it was pretty much like, and instead of like taking individuals as
hmm
units of analysis, this time you're taking states or nations
hmm
as units of analysis. But at the very last instance, the methodological nationalism, or like the lack of the international, or what like Moscow, like Rosenberg, like the inherently international aspect then was lost.
but what are you looking for? Some kind of multi-level, multi-scalar, multi-actor, neo-medievalist kind of understanding of society, or
No, not necessarily. Like mine is like to give an example, and that's actually like how I started my PhD
hmm
uh, studies as well. Like my topic for the PhD was third world and non-aligned movement,
hmm
and like as you know, after 1990s, there was a lot of end of debates, like the end of the nation state
oh yeah,
and end of development, end
end of
of
history,
ideology, end of history,
end of history.
the
Yeah.
end of history, and like two of those notions was actually the third world, end of the third world, because since we don't have after the Cold War, since we don't have a second world to speak
hmm
of, it would be a misnomer, so to speak, of an existence of a third, or a non-aligned movement, or a
hmm
non-alignment as a political strategy, because they believe that since there are no longer two blocks,
Yeah.
and or a
Any,
policy of non-alignment necessarily requires two blocks
yeah.
not to getting aligned with. So, like they said, and that was a prevalent view. But then,
Global North, Global South.
yeah, and but instead,
Yeah.
like, and people were criticizing third world being too homogeneous of a concept, to encapsulate all those different societies. But then they come up with an equally homogeneous and problematic concept, global South,
Mm-hmm.
and this time, different than the previous version, the third world at least, corresponded to a political strategy, okay, or an international solidarity movement.
Mm-hmm.
But Global South, it was just a geographical location on
Mm.
the map. It was actually like, it was
It's not.
what made third world actually, like that's what I argue in
Hey,
my thesis.
hey, is Australia part of the global south?
Yeah, that's the thing. And then the reason, and then what happened in both in theories of nationalism, theories of development, in almost every aspect of social sciences, this post-structural turn,
Yeah, yeah,
they come up with talking about meta geographies and
yeah.
like different. So they knew there was like this there was a
Everything meta.
problem. Yeah, yeah, and then it become a question of semantics and discursive discussions. And it's the same happened in the third world and with the nationalism theory as well, and even with like the post-colonial studies. So
Mm.
it all become a question of discourse, identity, and like the other constituting the self and stuff like that.
But Shadash, I think this is quite a long intro. We are already talking about a lot of
So,
things.
you
Yeah,
know that I
yeah.
have this tendency to jump from one topic to
Yeah,
so.
yeah, of
Since you
course.
are the moderator now,
I don't even know
keep
what
us
the
on track. Keep us on
I
track.
don't even know what the question was about. But yeah, we just I just asked you your journey to the PhD. But let us talk about your PhD. What was your PhD about?
Uh, my PhD actually like this, as I told you before, the question, the statement of the problem actually, like if we start from there, I
Mm,
was like questioning whether the same because uh, after 1990s,
mm-hmm,
people were talking about end of the nation state, but like 15, 20 years later, it came back with renewed vigor, just
mm-hmm,
like the development theory,
mm-hmm,
just like the ideology itself. So I
mm-hmm,
thought maybe the same applies to third world and
mm,
more importantly to non-alignment because nowadays as you know there's this new discussion regarding a new global more global cold war whether like it is taking place so I thought maybe
mm,
non-alignment why non-alignment is no longer a valid strategy so
mm.
that
Okay.
was my research
Okay.
course
So
but when I
why
started
non-alignment? Why non-alignment is no longer a valid strategy?
valid strategy. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
that's like because or third world as a meaningful analytical category for social sciences, and if it became irrelevant or insignificant following 1990s, what made it relevant
Mm,
is was it only the Cold War before
mm,
1990s between 1945 and 1990? Why was it relevant back then?
mm,
Because if we are talking that about it become irrelevant following the Cold War, we must answer why, when was it? Because the analogy itself, as many of us know, is
mm,
very flawed. The first world was the only tangible entity with regards like a only component of this analogy which corresponds to a tangible entity because it has its own security like it has NATO, IMF, World Bank, Marshall Plan, Seato, Santo, Anzus aspect. It
mm,
was like and it created a world capitalist market as well.
mm,
Second world, on the other hand, it was more reactionary and asymmetrical, I believe. It was in the defensive, especially with regards to its strategy towards the third world. It was not as aggressive as the Western world, let's say, or the United States. So both the Warsaw Pact and the Comecon and the Cominform, all the institutions of the second world, so to speak,
mm,
they were more reactionary, like they were actually shaped as a response to the Western initiatives. But nevertheless, it still corresponded to a real world, so to
mm,
speak, in terms of the analogy. But the third world, man, third world, like because first world, it corresponds to an ideology, or
mm,
more precisely, a solid production relation. Capitalism is what made first world and socialism, whether
yeah.
it's a less developed version, a developing socialism, an underdeveloped socialism, whatever
Mm,
you, real socialism, whatever you want to call it, but
mm,
it still corresponded to a product. But third world itself, it didn't correspond to any production relation. So on the material level, third world was actually, how can I say, third worldism is what created the third world, not other way around. It wasn't the third world that created third worldism, but the post-colonial solidarity between these newly independent countries is actually the only material thing that the notion of third world corresponds to.
The common experience of colonialism and the decolonization
Yeah,
process.
and the common experience, the common
Mm,
historical experience,
mm,
and the consequences actually of that, the uneven development which was caused by that common experience was
mhm,
the only tangible or like the material thing that the notion of third world was built upon. And
mm,
when I once again, when I looked at the theories of development, or nowadays as we call it, the classical development literature,
mhm.
which was like either the two schools of thought were actually created this faulty notion of third world hand in hand. One is the modernization theory, which was extremely internalist, based on Talcott Parsons' way of formulating stuff. And I believe Talcott Parsons was the one who actually transferred or like transmitted the internalism, the inherent internalism within traditional social thought to development theory.
That
And then
well, when you say internalism, sorry, when you say
it
internalism,
is like
do you mean that they view the development process as endogenous?
yeah, it is.
Okay, okay.
Or like let's say the way Justin Rosenberg puts it, studying social phenomena by reference to the inner
Yeah,
characteristics
yeah,
alone of a society
yes,
or a
yeah.
type of society. So
Yeah,
it is
so
like overlooking the international aspect, saying that these countries are not developed because of their traditional
yeah,
attributes. As
so
you know,
yeah,
like the
exactly. So they
yeah,
have an endogenous factor endowment.
endogenous, yeah. So like pretty
They have
much
a
all
domestic
societies
culture,
has to
domestic
go through
society,
this universal modernization
domestic
process.
institutions.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And like these are just like you know actually in some stage of development that like these countries, these third world countries, these post-colonial
Yeah.
countries, actually in some stage of development which developed countries has already passed. So eventually they will catch up. And
Following Rostov's model.
yeah, following Rousseau's like stages and a very unilinear model
Mm.
of development.
Yeah, of course.
And
Yeah.
like the critical, like the critical camp, on the other hand, the dependency school,
Hmm.
they were actually like I cannot say that they were an internalistic approach.
Mm.
That
No,
would
they
be not
were exogenous.
that would not be fair. But you know, like many scholars actually like position dependency theory in the larger Marxist social theory, and they say they are actually like the second wave of theories, classical theories of imperialism.
Hmm.
So, in that regard, what I believe theories of imperialism, uh, or let's start from, I think Marxist theory itself, classical Marxist theory itself was an internalist theory too, because it's part of the traditional social theory. It was based on a single society and so on. And I think Trotsky himself was critical of it.
Mm. Mm.
And the theories of imperialism, which started in the early 20th century, actually expanded the scope like of it brought geopolitics into the
Mm.
to the equation, but that was limited to the central capitalist states or like the
Hmm.
core capitalist countries, inter-imperialist rivalry between industrialized Western countries,
Hmm.
and then dependency theory, I believe, enlarged the this dimension to include the relation between developed and nowadays as we call it developed and developing or core and periphery countries. It expanded the spectrum of the international within Marxist theory to include these relations. But this time, they didn't give any agency to the peripheral countries because they disregarded the intra-periphery relations altogether. So like they have this understanding of a homogenized core and a homogenized periphery, just like, and as you know, third worldist solidarity itself or third worldism was very much like a intellectual sources of third worldism are pretty much the dependency theory itself. So that's why it created this faulty notion of a homogeneous third world hand in hand with modernization theory. One build it from with a, like modernization theory build it from an internalistic perspective,
Hmm.
while the other did it from an externalistic perspective. But at
Hmm.
the very last instance, and then that's the point when I
Yeah,
came
what is the
across with
point?
the came across with the theory of uneven and combined development.
Mm.
I thought like in order to uh, overcome these limitations, we need another theory which actually
Yeah.
integrates international dimension within capitalist development or
Would it be fair to say that uneven and combined development is the core concept of your dissertation?
the core theoretical framework is, yeah, I
Yeah.
can say that.
Yeah. So it's a whole theoretical framework, you would say, with many different concepts.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like a theory of Trotsky,
Yeah.
and like he formulated it in the beginning of 19th century,
Hmm.
I mean 20th century, sorry. And like the most important thing about it is like it's not actually just an academic theory, but it's part of his political strategy of permanent revolution.
Hmm.
What he was trying to explain was the rather unorthodox transition of Soviet Russia to capitalism, because he says like the
But
classical Marxist theory tells us that like all societies transition to capitalism in pretty much a path dependent trajectory.
mhm,
Uh, but like he says, like when I look at Russia, I don't see that. I see an amalgam of archaic and modern forms. While in the big cities, there was like in Moscow or St. Petersburg, there are the factories getting established. On the other side, when I look to the rural areas, I see the feudal
mhm,
production relations kept going. So this is they are not mutually exclusive
mhm,
concepts.
mhm. Okay,
They,
so can we focus on this then, uneven and
okay,
combined?
yeah.
Please enlighten us. What should we really put into this? What is the logic of the theory?
It's actually it says although the uneven development part, that's actually like as I told you, it's Trotsky's theory developed in the midst of a revolutionary struggle and in light of the political discussions,
Mm.
especially against the socialism in one country debate that it started. So like I spare you
But
the historical details.
is it uneven and combined in the sense that you
Same
described?
time, it is.
We have capitalist mode of production and then we have feudal mode of production coexisting. Is that part of it?
It is okay. Let me put it this way. It says like he starts with the extreme what he calls historical backwardness
Mhm,
of Russian society, the Tsarist Russia. And then it says like since Tsarist Russia compared to the other European powers was historically backward, and like this was the main characteristic of its social formations. He says like after at some point the whip of external necessities, that's what he calls them, or the geopolitical pressures of being coexisting within the same international environment with those developed industrialized Western powers, obliged Tsarist Russia to import capitalist production relations, or in the shape of industrialization, in the form of industry, they imported it. So it says like it's not the same mechanics that worked in Britain or in France or in Germany that was actually in place within Soviet Russia. It's like it's not the development of capitalism. It's not a unilinear process as Rostov and others talked about it later, but it's just like it's a multilinear, or like actually it allows you to jump. It's actually, and that's he clarifies.
mhm,
It's not jumping through stages, but a combination of the same historical stages at
mhm,
the same historical moment. So
mhm.
that's why he calls them combined development. But this doesn't necessarily mean that. So it's like he says capitalism, it is true that there is a tendency that it reproduces unevenness wherever it spreads, but also it levels out the differences between the least developed and the most developed countries. And that's called combined development. By
It levels up. Can you please?
it
Do,
levels
do,
out. It
is that
levels
this?
out.
Do you say that it reduces inequalities? Is that what you're
No,
saying? No,
not exactly. That's
because
the
that's
point.
first the first.
There is
Yeah,
a
but
dialectical relationship
okay,
between
because
uneven and
the first claim that you just mentioned, how I understand it at least, is that it increases inequalities. It spreads.
it reproduces them and
Yeah,
increases them,
yeah,
or like it changed their form, historical
yeah,
form,
yeah.
but it doesn't.
So what
But
is
at
the
the same
second
time,
claim? What is the second claim?
but the combined development is like another, and he says like capitalist development should be understood as like a dialectical relationship between these two different trajectories, or like these two different laws. He actually calls them laws of capitalist development. The first one is uneven development, the most universal law of capitalist development. But it says it doesn't, as capitalism spreads to new geographies, it in a way incorporates them to
Mm,
this bigger whole, and it both changes the social composition of the whole, the world system itself, but
Mhm.
also the society too. It makes
Mhm.
jumps. Like, for instance, in the Russian society, he says, which took hundreds of years, like the development that took hundreds of years or centuries in the Western or in Britain and France, he says like the Tsarist Russia managed to actually squeeze it into a matter of decades
Mhm.
because there comes another concept. Actually, the privilege of historical backwardness allows you to import whatever available, whatever is readily available in other nations. So you can actually import them
Mhm.
or emulate them
Mhm.
uh, without going through all those previous intermediate stages
Mhm.
that the first industrializers or
Mhm.
like the first capitalist countries has to go through. You can, as I said, the best way to explain it in a simple way is to call it a jump
Mhm.
between
Yeah.
stages. But that's what not he. It's not exactly what Trotsky means.
Mhm.
Is you're not jumping from a state because the it's never the way you emulate those institutions
Mhm.
or those readily available notions or concepts is never absolute.
Mhm.
You know, it's at some point it's actually encounters social resistance, and at the last instance, it is actually measured by the intellectual and material capacities of the society itself who's transitioning. But no matter what, like some of them actually, that's why he says, without understanding these two laws
Mhm.
as a like in relation, we cannot understand how United States manage to outdevelop or Germany in that regard, outdevelop England, or how today China, like being a feudal country during the 1950s, now become or in the same sense, Soviet Russia or Meiji Japan, like how these countries in very short time lapses manage to create industrial capitalist societies. So that's pretty much his theory. So uh, it says like a country, a historically backward country, has the privilege of emulating whatever readily available,
Mhm.
and it was actually obliged because the whip of external necessities, the geopolitical pressures, forces them to,
Mhm.
because otherwise they won't be able to survive.
Mhm.
You know, in the midst of the armed rivalry between the developed states, they are forced. The whip of external necessity obliges them to import certain institutions, certain methods of production or technology to your country, and which then, but like the class composition within Russia during capitalist transition, according to Trotsky, was quite different than what happened in England or France,
Mhm.
because it was not the merchant or like the bourgeoisie
Mhm.
who came face to face with the necessity of industrializing the society, but it was the state itself. So since it was the state that imported all those, like the industrial technology and the institutions that comes along with them, it
Mhm.
equipped it with itself actually with a force that many of the Western countries didn't have when they transformed to or transitioned to capitalism.
Mhm.
Thanks to these technologies, Trotsky argues, the Russian state become both uh, the biggest bank owner, the monopoly of railroads, monopoly. So this way, they were able to get the economic gains without facing the political consequences, just in terms of class relationships that
Mhm.
happened in England.
Mhm.
And this way, they can suppress because there wasn't a bourgeoisie in the same sense back in the Tsarist Russia.
Mhm.
So the serfs actually, or like the workers and or the farmers who were there, actually because of this might of the Tsarist Russia, which equipped itself with Western industrial technology,
Mhm.
they turned them into serfs, which created more pressure in the boiling room. And he says most of the, the liberals, both in Tsarist Russia and in Europe, they thought revolution was not a chance. Like a bourgeois democratic revolution will never happen in Soviet Russia, in Tsarist Russia,
Mhm.
because of the might of the Russian absolutism.
mm,
But according to Trotsky, it was other way around. It was quite the opposite. All those that pressure actually even created possibilities of having the first socialist revolution within a relatively backward country
mhm.
like Soviet Russia. So as
Mhm.
I told you before, it's like they are the political strategy and like the lines between political strategy and economic theory blurs
Mm,
at
mm. Yeah, okay,
certain instances.
but what the idea or what you actually do in your dissertation is that you apply this theory to make
The
sense
third
of
world, the
to,
third world, yeah,
exactly, and to
exactly.
make sense of the non-alignment movement.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like where does it like to position it within the third worldist or discourses of third world or third
So
world development?
so why is this theory useful? Why can it be applied to make sense of the
It's
non-alignment
actually
movement?
once again like I started from another discussion, an academic discussion. The sixth chapter of the dissertation I starts with the transition debate
Hmm.
among Marxists. The first one being the one between Sweezy and Dobbs, but like the one we are more interested in is this the second wave of this discussion, which goes in on the one pole of the discussion. There's Immanuel Wallerstein and world systems theory, and on the other pole it's Robert Brenner and political Marxism.
Hmm.
Many IR students are already know those names and like
Yeah,
what these theories
Wallerstein and
realize.
Brenner, maybe. Yeah. Mm,
Yeah, but like
mm,
to summarize it
mm,
briefly,
mm,
while Wallerstein, like the discussion was, Wallerstein was talking about like a capitalist world system
mhm,
and colonialism being a way of enlarging this system and like in a way incorporating different geographies. The world capitalist system is saw it as a mechanism of
mhm,
incorporation. While Brenner and like the political Marxists who followed like Brenner's theory, they said like you cannot actually say that like just because these countries or these regions are participating in a world capitalist system, it doesn't necessarily make them like their mode of production a capitalist uh, mode of production. Like the production relations there are not capitalist mode of production. And like I believe actually like the discussion itself initiated, although nowadays we are actually talking it about like a discussion between Brenner and Wallerstein,
mm,
actually it initiated with a exchange of views between Laclau and Andre Gunther Frank.
mhm,
And that was Laclau's main critique. He says like you are equating participating in a world capitalist system with having capitalist mode of production
mhm,
relations. And like I think both were right
mhm,
because Trotsky's theory shows us that these are not mutually exclusive things.
mhm,
You can both be part of the world capitalist system, as Wallerstein argues,
mhm,
rightfully, even though with a lot of theoretical loopholes. And at the same time, you could still, I wouldn't say feudal relationships for colonial countries, because as there's actually, I introduce this concept. I said like Trotsky's theory or like concept of privilege of historical backwardness doesn't apply to colonial countries because they didn't have the autonomy. We cannot see them as feudal countries. We can say Ottoman Empire, Tsarist Russia, or Japan before the Meiji Restoration. They were historically backward countries. But in my view, the colonial countries are historically left behind. And like historical backwardness have privileges, but historical left behindness, it doesn't have any privileges at all. So
mhm,
like I believe they started their transition to capitalism, but they can only completed it following the end of the Second World War with the decolonization
mhm,
movement, and in which non-aligned movement was like a key component. Uh, so like I started with the original unevenness, which I told you for colonialism, and like I introduced this historical left behindness as a true legacy of colonialism, which prevented them to make similar jumps because
mhm,
since they were exposed to capitalist production relations by their colonial masters, they
mhm,
still couldn't manage to make those leaps, like or the combination that like the Soviets or I don't know the so-called uh, Nix during the 1950s has
Hmm.
made,
Hmm.
because they didn't have the autonomy. Like, and I said, like Trotsky's theory, I believe a minor contribution maybe, but like
Hmm.
a core concept, an inherently international a force, in Rosenberg's words, like
Hmm.
the privilege of historical backgrounds and whip of external necessities.
Hmm.
These are the two inherently. That's actually what makes the theory, according to Rosenberg, a special theory, because he
Hmm.
says that there are many critical theories
Hmm.
in IR, but they are not international relations theories,
Hmm.
because of the same internalism that they try to, like most of the time, critical scholars, oh man, like the door is ringing. I don't know what
Yes.
to do.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
you can go and open.
So,
Or
sorry
or
about
or
that.
yeah, but the
No,
door is
no,
not
forget about it.
the door is
Let-
not far away, right?
Yes, like, I'm gonna go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You just open.
Quickly.
I'll wait for you here.
Oh, sorry, man.
That's
I'm
okay.
back.
It's okay.
I had to open the door.
Mm.
So where were we?
Yeah.
Yeah, the critical
Yeah,
IR
yeah,
scholars,
yeah,
he
yeah,
says, like
yeah.
most of the
Yeah.
time, whenever they wanted to, overcome the limitations of
Mm.
the so-called realist theory in
Mm.
IR, they mostly import conceptual tools from other disciplines
Mm.
of social sciences. But he says, like, since those tools themselves were forged under an internalist thinking, they rarely brought with themselves the analytical tools
Mm.
to capture inherently international forces or
Mm.
phenomenons.
Mm.
And like he says, but Trotsky's theory,
Mm.
there are inherently international forces, and they are not just like balance of power or
Mhm.
like they include uh, actually like forces that directly affects or influences the the social or the class structure of the
Mhm.
society itself.
Mhm. Mhm.
So this way, it's not only critical against the mainstream theories,
Mhm.
but also to he is not only critical against mainstream theories, but also to the critical theories, the ones that we talk about, the discursive,
Mhm.
all those
Mhm.
as which become more and more prevalent, especially following 1990s,
Mhm.
which have their heyday uh, following the turn of the millennia. And like this is like we still need a material theory.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, okay, we are post-positivists, we got it, but like this doesn't necessarily means that like like
You're
that's why
cr-
I actually prefer calling it in the negative sciences, because when you don't have foundational truth,
Mhm.
like say that there are no foundational truths exist,
Mhm.
then what's the point of making science?
Mhm.
It's like you're just making speculative
Mhm.
or like I don't know. That's
Yeah,
like
but yeah,
it's a
but
hard topic, so I
yeah,
don't want
yeah,
to blame
yeah.
any others.
But
So
if we go back to your research question, I mean, this was supposed to be related to the research question of what was it again?
what
Uh,
non-alignment?
yeah,
Why non-alignment is not a valid strategy today?
yeah. So
So in
why?
order
So
to,
so so in light of this theory, why
yeah,
is non-alignment not a valid strategy today?
uh, I don't think non-alignment is not a valid strategy. I think it's
Okay,
very much valid. The
okay.
reason non-aligned movement, though, the first thing to clarify is that I'm not talking about like a reorganizing or I don't know, revitalizing non-aligned movement. Non-aligned
Mm,
movement is dead.
mm,
NAM today,
mm,
it's like we cannot call what remain like the Saudi Arabia is part
mm,
of like
mm,
non-aligned movement,
mm, mm,
or Cuba, like if
mm,
you
mm.
like want to, like not necessarily. I don't want to give
No, it's dead. It's dead.
examples from
It's dead.
the hardcore
Yeah,
allies of the United
yeah,
States,
yeah.
but so none of those countries, majority of those countries are not non-aligned.
Mm,
But the reason non-aligned movement, in my view, and after this analysis that I made, the reason that non-aligned movement is not a moribund organization, so to speak, was
mm,
because they left aside the strategy of non-alignment. But during their non-aligned years, they made extreme gains. They changed the
mm,
composition of United Nations.
mm,
They come up with what many scholars of international law calls a counter-hegemonic international law,
mm,
uh, especially with regards to disarmament and all those development agencies which was built under the auspices of UN. It
mm,
was actually thanks to the, and as I told you before, it wasn't based on any material reality other than solidarity,
mm,
post-colonial solidarity
mm,
itself. But
mm,
even with that very limited, of course, Cold War helped.
mm,
Like, not saying that it, the context wasn't important. Of
mm,
course, it actually like enhanced what I will say their privilege of historical backwardness, because this way they could have utilized both sides, both the Western world,
mm,
and like they could get aid from the both camps and so. But like in the very core of it, it was just the solidarity,
mm,
and with so little they achieved so much.
mm, mm,
But then, of course, the combined development occurred. The whip of external necessity, like the first part, I started with the original initial unevenness, the
mm,
colonialism, and
mm,
that. And then after decolonization, the whip of external necessity was the Cold War itself. The two military blocs, and one is very aggressive, building military alliances all around the turbo. And these countries were newly independent countries.
mm,
They they had in mind state building
mm.
and providing development, like but what I mean is like post 1945
Yeah,
development
yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of post 1945 development discourse,
Mm,
like better schools. And when I looked at the World Bank development reports from 1980s, they managed actually, like, not in the sense that they desired, they
mm,
didn't become Western societies, but
mm.
they their capitalist development, their transition to capitalism was completed in
Yeah,
like three, 4 decades.
that is also the argument of Kamak, right?
Kamak, yeah, Paul Kamak. It is, yeah, you
Paul
are right.
Kamak is in some sense saying that yeah, the capitalist system is now done spreading geographically.
No, no, I'm not. I will say it will
Yeah,
never limited accumulation.
but just to say what he's
Yeah, yeah,
saying, and then but he's saying that we still, or not we, but capitalist institutions, or he's actually referring to the IGOs. So the fundamental task of the intergovernmental organizations, the UN bodies, all of those, is basically to transform the social relations of the world into capitalist relations.
yeah.
Because
That's
capitalist markets are all over the world, and we're basically engaging in capitalist market exchange all over the world. But we still need to transform the social relations of the world in order for the capitalist transition to be complete.
yeah.
And that is the fundamental task of the IGOs of the world. That is what he's saying, at least. I mean, you can disagree, of course, but it
There
sounds
is
a
no,
little
no,
bit
no.
like
For
Kamak. Yeah.
instance, with regards to United Nations, like
Mm,
in the thesis, I wish I could have showed you that, but like
mm,
I made this chart,
mm,
like identifying the institutions of first world, second world, and third world.
mm,
And for me, United Nations, okay, maybe we cannot say it was like overwhelmingly dominated by the Western Bloc or United, but it was a Western Bloc at the last instance, because all the funding was coming from the United States.
mhm,
And it was, I would say, the Western Bloc's preferred area of contestation.
mhm,
They want, whenever there was like a struggle going on, they wanted to, transfer it to the auspices of United Nations, because
mhm,
they had although back in the day, the Soviets and nowadays the Russians, or like the China, will
mhm,
still have, like, they are permanent members of the Security Council and so. But the main basic objective was to limit their influence in the United Nations structure, and I think they
mhm,
managed
mhm,
to a degree.
mhm,
And then, and that is actually what I meant by it. Like, it was a combined development, the development of the third world. But like what they changed was always under for instance, the UN Security Council composition.
yeah.
They extended with their struggle, they managed to extend the number of non-permanent members from 11 to 15,
mm,
16, and they changed the composition. Also, the ECOSOC, but they were all UN institutions. So from the very beginning, actually, like there was their boundaries were set,
mhm,
but so they already internalized the idea that like if we want to exist or if we wanted to be recognized as autonomous entities, we had to do it under
mhm,
the auspices of UN.
mm,
There was, and it came from like that, the inherited unevenness caused this. But they, even though like they didn't revolutionize the whole UN structure,
mhm.
they managed uh, to
No,
have.
they integrated into it,
Yeah,
and
they integrate into it. They both change the system itself, but they and I would say and like when I'm maybe the difference we need to make between development is like what I meant by development is I mean capitalist development.
mhm.
I don't mean development in the sense of the 1945, the one which comes with point four speech uh, or like all these United Nations Development Program.
Yeah, no, no, of course. You
This,
mean capitalist development.
they
Yeah.
say, yeah. So like they
But
manage
but all of those programs under the UNDP and so on
yeah,
and
yeah,
so on,
yeah.
in line with Kamak's
That helps
perspective,
capitalist
that's all
development.
about capitalist development.
Capitalist development. And I'm saying they
Mm,
managed. They shouldn't seen as a failure. They
mm,
manage to do. They finish or like
mm,
complete their capitalist transition. They
mm,
developed. And what is like capitalist development after all? It was like when you say that was the first misconception during the 1950s,
mhm,
equating capitalist development with a more equal, more prosperous society. That because back in the day, United States was a symbol of that as well. Nowadays, we know from United States too that it's not development. There are skyscrapers in the United States, but there are homeless people too, and
mm,
that's the world now.
mm,
Thanks to what I mean by combined development.
mm,
Nowadays, India and some contender states, there are not nobody like there is another brand of literature which goes with Radhika Desai and so on, and it actually associates combined development with contender states only, like China, you know, outpacing United States but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way.
mm,
You don't have like not all countries. I would say, as Trotsky
mhm,
argues, it is part of capitalist development
mm.
because for capitalism to spread to other geographies, it needs to build infrastructure. But
Yeah,
this doesn't
yeah,
mean develop exactly the development that's in the mind of
yeah,
the Indian people,
yeah.
the
So,
suburban Indian people in 1950s. But it
so with
created those roads,
so
those
with
dams.
combined development, you're in some sense also taking into account global value chains, global
Exactly,
cities,
exactly. Global cities.
a global transnational capitalist
This,
class, and so on and so on.
all these countries had huge demographic booms
Mm,
after 1950s, right?
mm,
But
mhm,
regardless, but when you look at them, their GMP per capita, and I'm not saying that it's a very good indicator, but I
mm,
believe it's a very good indicator of capitalist transformation. Other than that, for me, it doesn't show anything, that whether
mm,
your country is like
mhm.
a developed country or not. But
That,
GMP per
mm,
capita,
mm,
because it's all about production per
mm,
head,
mm,
like per capita production.
mm,
Eh, Even though they had this huge demographic boom,
mhm,
they all had, and some of them, like majority of them, of these third world countries in Africa, in Latin America, all around the world, they all managed to have like 10%, 30, not all, but the great majority of them,
mm,
13% GNP per capita growth. And that's like, it didn't, of course, the poverty
mm,
increased there, unemployment increased there,
mhm,
the income inequality
mhm,
is maybe worse.
mm,
But like now, all these countries in Nigeria, we have luxurious airports, and everybody is using smartphones. That
mm,
is actually like what combined development is, as
mhm,
you said, getting integrated to global capital accumulation
mhm,
and like transformation of social productions of relations.
mhm,
And that's it. What I
mhm,
mean by capitalist development. And
mhm,
in that regard, I believe non-aligned movement and like what I call post-colonial capitalism,
mhm,
but like not in the sense that like the post-colonialism literature, like It's just like I can't remember. Like you had what was his name? Siba Grovugi.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
As,
yeah,
as he says, like a world historical moment,
yeah, yeah,
post-colonial,
yeah, yeah.
post,
World historical moment.
not in the sense that like an identity or so,
Hmm.
because like I'm actually like contrasting it with colonial capitalism,
Hmm.
a concept developed by Onur Ulaşince,
Hmm.
and I said like it was colonial capitalism. If until 1945 we were
Hmm.
talking about the capitalist transformation of the core,
Hmm.
from 1945 onwards we start talking about the capitalist transformation. Although it was part of the capitalist world system. They hadn't finished like or completed their capitalist transition, but following 1945, they until 1990, until the end of the Cold War, and actually that was what enabled all those globalization scholars to talk about a global world.
Hmm.
And because all these countries managed to complete their transition to capitalism,
Hmm.
and then the scholars could, and that's like I don't know, since we're, no, but I never finished the program. But since you were a globalization scholar, since you're a globalization scholar, maybe you get offended by it.
Yeah.
But like, that's what like Rosenberg and Menas also Radika decide too. They are very critical of
Hmm.
globalization scholars during 1990s.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
they actually claim that they um, conflated the deceptive zeitgeist of the era, because like of the collapse of Soviet socialism and the
Hmm.
Second World Order, so
Yeah.
it created this huge political vacuum.
Hmm.
And during the process of filling it up, there was like a purely conjunctural moment, and they misconceived it. They thought it was like the general norm now,
Hmm.
but it was like actually only lasted for 10 years, not even like, or let's say 15
So
years.
what lasted only for 15 years?
Globally, like the political vacuum created by
Mm,
the
okay, so
collapse of Soviet Union,
okay, yeah, yeah. So the political
and
vacuum
people
only lasts.
misleading it with globalization, saying
Mm,
that like now there's only one ideology
mm,
remained in the
mm,
whole world, and like all world is a one world now, one market, one nation, the end of the nation state. Political boundaries
mm,
are irrelevant now
mm,
because
mm, mm. Yeah, no,
all the things
no.
that we learned in the
Yeah,
long
yeah, yeah, yeah,
studies
yeah.
program.
But by certain scholars. So what is that?
So,
What?
yeah,
What?
globalization, the follies of globalization theory.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the
yeah,
name of the
exactly. What are those hyperglobalists called again? There is this Japanese guy. He's the example of the hyperglobalist.
Omaye,
Yeah,
the end
yeah,
of the
yeah,
nation
yeah,
state, end
exactly.
of the
Omaye.
nation state. Yeah,
Yeah,
Omaye.
it's symbolized by his work. Yeah.
So like
Um,
yeah, that's actually
mm,
what I argue is
mm.
like this combined development, and not only in terms of macroeconomic indicators.
The state is as present and as necessary as ever.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So I, and I'm
Especially in global capitalism, the state is needed.
so I believe same applies
Mm,
to the notion of third world. If
mm,
I don't want to use global south,
mm,
because like as I mentioned before, it's like it's just the geography is Australia part of the global south.
mm.
Right, you rightfully asked. So like I believe third world it's correspond now, and following
Yeah,
1990s, that didn't only become relevant
but isn't
for
there a,
academic circles, it also had a negative connotation
yeah,
now.
but
Whenever
Challenge,
someone uses third world,
yeah,
it's in a negative way.
okay, yeah, but so you want to use the third world concept?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I think it's, but not in the sense, I agree with the people who says that as an analytical category, it no longer corresponds like to a social reality because there's like too homogeneous but so is the global south.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But so how do you?
If I have to choose between those two,
Mm,
I'll go with the third world because
okay.
like third world still connotes
Mm,
a even though prevalently it's used as it has a negative connotation now.
mm-hmm,
Oh,
mm-hmm,
third world problems,
mm-hmm,
stuff like that.
mm-hmm,
Still, back in the day, like, this is actually, I believe, the success of the liberal or the globalization theory, like
mm-hmm,
the third world and third worldism getting associated with or getting attached this negative connotation.
mm-hmm,
Didn't happen, coincidentally. It was like there was because the project itself, if it gained a lot. So
mm.
for
So
the
what? So
hegemony of the system,
yes,
it was a danger. It corresponded
but
to a
but
counter-hegemonic thing.
but if you want to use the concept of third world.
Yeah.
How do you want to use it? Why do you want to use it? If you say it's not valid as an analytical category, how will you use it then?
It's once again like goes back to the relationship between non-alignment and third world. It's like if we step back a little bit and like as I told you, after 1945, in the Cold War environment,
Hmm.
these newly independent states, and I define it as the whip of external necessity,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
had forced them to development. They were surrounded by new military alliances and so on.
Yeah.
And regardless, it doesn't matter like about the geopolitical decisions that the two superpowers make. It didn't matter if you choose, let's say, a socialist path to development, and you had only two options as a third world country, either the socialist path or like the capitalist path. And whichever you choose, you would like necessarily antagonize the other superpower.
Hmm. Hmm.
So under these circumstances, the newly independent states, they say if they would have limited say in the world affairs if they remained as individual countries. So like they
Yeah, they come
come up
together.
and
Yeah, yeah,
they
yeah.
came together
Yeah,
and like
okay.
and then they
So,
meant that they yeah
but
and
can we
that's
but can we see this political use of the third world today? Isn't there a sense of false solidarity in the concept of the third world when these countries do not necessarily agree with one another? Where is the common political agenda, so to speak?
I'll say no, it's not a false solidarity, no solidarity at all. That's why there is no third world. We cannot speak of a third world now. But
Yeah,
we cannot
exactly.
say that there are no military blocks nowadays.
Hmm.
Antagonistic military blocks. Can we say, following 1990s or like 200s, we don't have any longer antagonistic military blocks. We still have military antagonistic blocks.
Yeah, yeah, of
People are
course.
talking about the new Cold Wars, the Russia,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
war going on in Ukraine,
Yeah.
and in all those, where does Global South stand? What is the position of the Global South?
Mm,
Global South, that's
mm.
why I call it, it was just a geographical location. It is analytically, actually, a less relevant concept than the third world itself. Third
Mm.
world, at least, corresponds to a historical reality because back in the day, third world was a real thing. It
Oh,
had gains and like it transformed the international order, like not maybe foundationally, but
so,
to
so,
an
so,
extent.
so what is the conclusion of the project?
My conclusion
Mm.
is non-alignment since the 1950s is more relevant than ever, but not this cannot non-alignment strategy cannot be pursued. And I'm okay. First, let me finish the conclusion. So,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
we'll delve into the details.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
But like
Conclusion, short and concise first.
it cannot be made under the auspices of non-aligned movement.
Mm.
Actually, what a new non if a country wants to pursue a strategy of non-alignment nowadays, it should do everything that non-aligned movement doesn't do, like or did back in the day and
Yeah,
no longer does.
yeah.
The main argument is nowadays, I believe the geopolitical, like the historically what made non-aligned movement a relevant or a significant factor was their geopolitical propositions based on, like you shouldn't be part of any military alignments.
Hmm.
You should always support disarmament.
Hmm.
You shouldn't take part uh, in any great power rivalries, like
Hmm.
everything that nowadays the third world countries are refraining from. They are
Hmm.
getting part in the superpower conflicts.
Hmm.
They are buying a lot of arms. So
Hmm.
like that's it. But this doesn't mean that non-alignment as a political strategy is irrelevant. Non-aligned movement is a moribund organization because they left the strategy of non-alignment.
Hmm.
But today, it is very possible. And like all of these problems that we are talking about, the war in Ukraine, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict nowadays, the possible military intervention in Taiwan, like all the stuff, all those frozen conflicts, and the third world, since or like let's say the global south or the developing countries doesn't have anything to say on
Hmm.
these
Hmm.
matters,
Hmm.
and only way they can enhance their voice is through following a policy of non-alignment. And
Yeah.
when I actually
I
told
see.
this
I see.
people, they like Turkish people, they told me, oh, but like President Erdogan did
Mm,
this with the Russians. And I said, that's not a policy of non-alignment.
mm,
Non-alignment doesn't mean a policy of neutrality or like a seeking a balance of power between different. It doesn't mean that. It was a neutrality is a very passive stance. Non-alignment is an active stance. You actually get involved in
mm,
world affairs, but
mm,
with like in solidarity
mm,
with other nations or like other states.
mhm,
I made the same equation that like that I criticized in my master thesis.
mhm,
Like at least on a state level, if you want to have like a more significant position
mm,
within world politics, you could still pursue doing it in collaboration or in solidarity with other developing nations
mhm,
and like not in the sense of G77 or as I told you before, because what non-alignment become, and that was the empirical part of my research
mm.
uh, from the 1961 Belgrade Conference to I don't know, there are still non-aligned movement conferences today.
Yeah, yeah,
They're still coming together.
yeah.
But like, back in the day, what was actually important was the geopolitical positions. It's
Mhm,
actually before the Belgrade summit, they made another meeting in Cairo just to determine the criteria for which countries should be allowed
mm,
to non-aligned movement, and they
mm,
were all geopolitical propositions,
mm,
like geopolitical criterias. But nowadays, it and each day it becomes less geopolitical and more about development,
mm,
more about technical cooperation, cultural
mm.
cooperation, and the geopolitical propositions, the space that they
It's
have
more. It's
within
more and
within the
more.
documents.
It's more and more like what Francis Fukuyama said.
The South cooperation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Instead of you shouldn't have foreign military bases on
We
your
will
country.
we will be endless caretakers of a museum where we will solve technical issues
Issues, yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
become experts in solving in various environmental problems and so on, but not fighting any great political struggles for recognition.
Exactly.
Mm,
It's that's the thing. Like
mm.
talking about sustainable development, talking about technology transfer. Which technology? Like, like I don't want to put it this way, but
Yeah.
like it is more of this development gibberish, let's say, is
Mm,
put it
mm.
like actually coded on the documents of Nana each day.
Yeah.
And like, with a frequency analysis, like in my thesis,
Mm.
I proved that each day
Within
the
a capitalist
propositions
paradigm.
within yeah. So let's talk less about geopolitics and our
Yeah.
geopolitical position and more about how can we
Yeah.
collaborate or cooperate in our attempt of development.
So we
And
can
it
transfer
didn't.
technology or
And the funny thing is, the most amount of development they actually, all these countries had actually experienced was during those days when they
mm,
were stick to their geopolitical propositions.
mm,
The more they left their geopolitical positions,
mm.
the less they actually maybe this is once again a correlation,
Yeah,
but that's once again a correlation, not a causation, maybe a correlation.
it's a
But
big
like
claim
the
though.
amount of
Yeah,
development, like
yeah,
the economic development, to put it in the
yeah,
capitalist sense,
yeah.
it was way bigger during their when they were fighting in solidarity or like with regards to the geopolitical positions. So
Mm,
I say stick to the geopolitical positions
mm. Okay.
and still today you have the chance of enhancing your voice
Yeah,
within the international arena and have a say on
yeah,
the
yeah.
issues.
So you want
uh,
them to become more activist, more political, not refraining from the geopolitical issues, and trying to, like the Chinese, try to get more discourse power on the world stage, in some sense.
yeah,
Mm.
and like
Uh,
yeah,
mm Okay, interesting. That's very interesting. We will see if they take heed, if we will see more of an activist non-alignment movement or not. Will be
We are
good.
not. I can answer the question.
Mhm.
We are not going to see a more active. No, no, I'm not even sure
Mm.
we'll like ever make an
But at the same
intelligible
time, there,
discussion regarding the non-aligned movement. But like
yeah.
this doesn't mean that non-alignment doesn't is not a valid strategy,
No, no, of course not.
especially for developing countries,
Mm,
especially when China is on the rise
mm.
and like people were talking about like a multipolar world order.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like actually like it creates a good window of opportunity for following a new
Mm,
non-alignment strategy. But once again, based on the
mm, mm,
geopolitical propositions
mm,
and based on disarmament
mm.
uh, and like the avoidance of getting participate
Yeah, but how do you see the
into
non-alignment
lies.
move? How do you see the non-alignment movement in relation to the conflicts in Palestine, in Ukraine, in Sudan, in the Middle East as a whole? I mean, in so many places where the non-alignment movement could perhaps articulate
Like most people believe the Bandung Conference 1955 was the first time the notion of third world or non-alignment came into the fore in the political arena. I believe it was 1961 Belgrade Conference because of certain reasons. But even after during the Bandung Conference, there were like very like clear cut stances with
but
regards
but
to Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
yeah, but don't we see
They,
that today as well? Some of those
no, I don't.
no?
I don't. It is like still within the documents of like in their final communiques, they are talking about the Palestinian conflict. They say Israel, what Israelis are making is an apartheid regime,
Mm,
and they say this was the last frontier of the decolonization movement and
mhm,
stuff like that. There
mm.
are there, but like back, we don't see the same amount of engagement or like let's say. I don't know, like as a group,
Mm.
they were not doing much
No,
when
no,
compared
not.
to their historical role with regards to like the apartheid regime in South Africa or like for instance Algeria
Mm,
back then they were giving like their independence war, but they were still invited to the Belgrade conference, even
mm,
though they weren't officially an
mm,
independent state.
mm,
So like
mm.
this was a different level of support.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
mean, than what they are doing today.
yeah.
It is like a back
There's
then
some.
I can say that they were the carrier of decolonization for a while, like
Mm,
at least until 1970s.
mm,
But nowadays they are just like a group of world leaders coming together and talking about like good wishes.
mm.
And like most of them, the reason behind this is that most of them are actually, in a way, uh, politically entangled with like the Western powers themselves.
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
it's impossible for, and that's the thing. When I discuss my theory or like my argument with a Syrian friend of mine, he
Hmm.
told me, so like what you propose for Syria, like you want the Russian military bases, or like what about the Turkish military bases?
Mm,
It's like, do you think like, oh, we should? And I say like, and at some point I understand what he means, like because you cannot just say, okay, now I'm following a policy of non-alignment. So all you
mm.
all you foreign military powers, please
Leave.
leave my country. You cannot do it that way. I'm
Mm,
aware of that.
mm,
But like the basic thing is when you think about all this state individually, the task seems impossible to achieve. But like if these countries manage in a way, and I told you before, not with these ruling classes or like these politicians, because they themselves
mm,
are politically engaged, like very much
mm,
engaged with the Western powers or the Western capital groups
mhm,
or, or Western political institutions. So like it's impossible for like expecting Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Emirates
mhm,
to follow like policy of non-alignment and
mhm,
stop buying weapons from United States
mm,
or from Russia.
mm,
But like if a collective as a collective, they start doing such a thing. I will say their gains. They will have new gains.
mm,
They will make new jumps in the hierarchy of nations.
mm,
That's
mm. Yeah. Interesting. This has been a very long process. I mean, the PhD process. We don't have too much time because we have already spent a lot of time.
I know. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I talk a
yeah,
lot.
yeah. No.
It was good
Yeah, yeah,
talking
yeah,
to you, man,
yeah, yeah.
after
I know, I know.
all this time.
Because it would be nice if you could share some of the challenges in this long journey, and maybe give
Yeah.
students some kind of advice or insight into how to overcome those challenges or what, yeah, what do you have to say?
Now, the PhD process is a very personal process. I cannot generalize. I think my own experience to be the case, or would be the case for most PhD students there. But
Mm,
like my biggest challenge was to focus, or let's say because that's how I work. Like I had to put my thesis at the center of my life, and like not anything is. I cannot do it as like a something going on the side, but
mm-hmm,
like there are people like that, and I envy them a lot.
mm,
We call them multitasking people. Like, they work at the same time, but
mm,
like got their PhD, or they have all these other things going on, other projects,
mm,
uh, or like the family issues, but it never uh, actually keeps them away from writing their PhD. That at the center of my life, and it was the biggest challenge, uh, actually,
there was the biggest challenge was to put the PhD in the center of your life.
in the center of my life. Yeah,
Mm,
like to focus it, because you have what I believe, like at least that's the way it worked for me.
hmm.
Like you should go to bed thinking about your thesis, and when you wake up, you
Yeah,
should be thinking, and if it's possible, dream about your thesis too.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
it's in your hand. That's
yeah,
that's how it works for me,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's hard
yeah,
because, like as you said, at some point life hits. Like
yeah,
I have a daughter that now I was working in Muğla University. I
yeah.
got fired from there, like, and my daughter was in Ankara. Like in every 2 weeks, I had to go and visit her. So like when you give a break 2, 3, 4 days, it
Mm,
becomes a 10-day break, and
mm.
then all of a sudden you're in the ground zero, like a point blank,
Yeah,
start everything all over.
yeah,
So and that's why it took some time for me to complete my PhD.
yeah.
But like that's the thing. If you are making a PhD, because I see a lot of people like that. Like when I visit my university, when I talk with my friends, there are people that they're working in a state institution, and they say like they are writing a PhD, and I say congrats. Like
Mm,
it's it must be hard, and like most of the people, it's like they do it as a side project. It's like
mm,
either to get a promotion at work,
mm.
and like
So you do a
it doesn't
PhD.
necessarily have to be a very hard thing to accomplish.
So in Turkey, people are doing a PhD to get a promotion on their work.
Like for master thesis, for sure. Like
Yeah.
if you're working
Okay.
for a
Yeah.
state
Yeah.
institution, and if you
Yeah.
have a master's, then
Yeah.
directly, automatically, you become a specialist, and like then
But a
you get
PhD
promoted. You
too.
get not a PhD,
Yeah.
but like
Okay.
people like the
Yeah.
title doctor.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
They really
I
like
like
writing
it.
the DR in front of their names.
Yeah.
All like both
Yeah.
politicians, the journalists,
Yeah.
everybody think
Yeah.
that they're a doctor of something.
Yeah. And even if you're not a doctor, you can always
And
write
even
it
if,
anywhere. You
yeah,
can come
yeah,
out.
yeah, that's it. And that's the thing. I believe, and once again, like who am I to speak? But
Yeah.
like a PhD is something that a person should follow if they want to become an academic. Other
Mm.
than that, make another master's. If you're
Mm.
full of
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
of education,
Okay.
like go
Yeah.
and make an about like a PhD for me means like from now on you will be teaching. Uh, like what you have
Yeah,
been
I think that's a good
studying.
distinction. So if you want to, like, let's say, if you want to climb in the hierarchy, let's say at your workplace, or if you want to get another degree, whatever, then do another master's. But
Yeah,
if you want to work within academia, then you have to do a PhD, and you don't do a PhD in order to enhance your job prospects.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
depends. There are some PhDs, like, and like, once again, who am I to judge? But like,
Mm,
if you pick, if you manage to limit uh, your focus, like, or what you are what you're studying, what you're examining,
mm,
uh, and like do like a PhD on a
mhm,
very narrow topic
mhm.
with very limited theoretical
Yeah.
uh, openings, let's
Mm,
say, then yeah, you can complete it. Like, I'm not saying that it's impossible
mm,
to have a PhD while working, or like, like, some maybe you seriously see it as a side project and you
mm,
can still finish it. I know people like that, but I don't
mm,
believe that, like, it corresponds to the underlying logic
mm,
of doing a PhD.
mm,
Like, to make a research, and
mm,
then to make such an extensive research
mm,
that later on in your life you can teach about certain topics
mm,
that you have researched during your PhD
mm,
studies.
mm, mm. That makes a lot of sense, I think.
Yeah, that's at least how it works,
Mm,
or at least how I think about it.
mm.
But as I told you before, there are a lot of doctors, especially in Turkey, and not all. And some might even disagree with me, and they
Yeah.
say that, like, this, why are you, I don't know, mythologizing or sanctifying to have a PhD like that? See,
Mm,
I did one in
mm,
less than 6 months
mm.
on the foreign policy approach of
Mm,
Condoleezza Rice,
mm,
and like
yeah,
it was, or like Azerbaijani Turkish relationships.
that's very important, though.
It's an important topic. I'm
Yeah,
not saying that it's not important, but it depends on
especially for
how.
especially for a neo-Ottoman empire.
Yeah, for neo-Ottomanists, it's the Turkic republics. It's something that you
But
must.
we need to talk about that some other time about the Turkish foreign policy.
Turkish foreign policy. I wouldn't consider myself as an expert I'm just following the news. There's like,
Okay,
I
yeah,
believe there.
but you can convey what the news are saying to us.
Of course,
Mm.
I can always talk about stuff, as you see.
Mm.
Like, if you want me to talk about stuff, I can, but I'm not sure if I
Well,
can
hey,
give you intelligible outputs.
yeah.
Or like
Well, we should
information.
start. We should start a show actually. We can talk
It's
about Turkish
okay.
foreign policy. It would be nice.
It's
And
okay. It will
you
be a
transmit
pleasure for
Turkey because it's a very important country in a very important region. And I think a lot of people that don't know anything about Turkey really and don't know the language, they would like to know more about Turkey, don't you think?
yeah,
And all Turkey's, I mean, wide interests throughout the region, all the way down to Somalia and above to China and so on.
Somalia is
Mm,
like I believe it's a whole different case. It's more
mm.
than like the it's a way of transferring.
Now connection was lost. Chadash, are you with me?
Okay,
There,
how about now? Yeah,
you're back now. All right, I
okay,
think this is it.
okay.
It has been,
We'll talk about Somalia later, though.
yeah,
Okay, I think
Turkey, Somalia
Turkey's
relate.
role in Somalia. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
that is
what
what.
we'll talk about.
Yeah, no, but it is interesting. I mean, there was recently a meeting between Egypt, Eritrea, and Somalia in Asmara, and there's also some tensions boiling there, which unfortunately happen way too often in the Horn of Africa. And then we have Ethiopia's deal with Somaliland to get access to the port, and so on and so on. And there's so many other factors apart from what I just mentioned. So it's very
Maybe
interesting. Maybe Turkey's playing a role there as well. Would be
in
interesting to
terms
see.
of African politics, African
Yeah,
international
yeah,
politics, you should be the one
yeah.
who
And in
showed,
Libya, no, in Libya as
yeah,
well.
in Libya.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
once upon a time it was one of the Turkish contractors' heaven.
Mm.
Uh, there was like when the first Libyan intervention happened,
mm,
35,000, almost 35,000 Turkish, let's say, engineers and
mm,
like workers in
mm,
all fields.
mm,
They had to came back to
mm,
Turkey.
Yeah, a lot of Chinese had to leave as well.
And this was like it was seen as a lost ground,
Mm,
for the Turkish sub-imperial ambitions was
yeah,
like a Libya's gone.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
we were going to reconstruct that
Mm,
country.
mm,
Why does the French is bombing now?
yeah, 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 yeah. It's sad actually what
It
happened
is.
there.
It is.
I think this is it, Ocharash.
Thank you very much.
This
Once
was
again,
it was very very nice talking to you,
same.
Cagdas Özenis. For those of you who look for Cagdas publication, please send me a link so I can put it in the description notes or whatever it is called. You know those notes that are
Okay.
under there. You when you
Comments. The
yeah
comment.
when you can read above, they have the notes, then you have the comments. So that section on YouTube, I can put some links there. Hmm? All right. So,
Thanks once again
mm,
for having me.
yeah,
Was a
it's
pleasure.
it's an honor.
An
It's a pleasure.
honor.
Yeah, and we will talk again, man. It was a long time ago, and I missed you, man.
I
So
missed you as well.
I hope we can talk more.
Always
Mm,
like
mm,
intellectually inspiring
mm,
is to
mm,
talk to you, man.
mm.
It's like reading a book.
I didn't talk so much actually.
Yeah, I
This
know, but
time.
this time, but like I was, I
Yeah.
recently
Uh,
completed my PhD, so
yeah.
I did the talking. But
Yeah,
next
yeah,
time,
yeah. Next time,
I
I
think
might
you
do
have
some
more
talk.
to offer than
Yeah,
I do.
I
So
no, no, no.
especially with
Yeah,
regards to African politics,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
the expert here.
Yeah, I no, I don't, and I'm not an expert, but I have looked at some Chinese African relations lately. Actually, that's true. That's true. I actually just got an article accepted, so that's really nice. I can share.
The Third World Quarterly article.
No, no, no. That I haven't submitted that one yet. Still working on it.
Okay,
I have a deadline,
I'm
15
sure
days.
it's
Yeah. So
I'm
we'll
sure it's
see.
gonna be a good
Yeah,
one.
yeah, we'll see. All right. Yeah, speaking about the third world as a concept. Yeah, all right. Very nice, man. And take care of your family. And all the very
You
best.
too.
Yeah.
All the very best to you as well. Have
Yeah.
a good one.
I
Talk
will
to you.
just pause this now. 1 second.